Hello, and thank you again for joining us at the 2022 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference Competitive Advantage Talks, presented by Kager, also known as the Craft Analytics Group. My name is Mike Duke, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce our next presentation, the next frontier of data analytics in sports, integrating performance data and video, presented by Catapult. Please join me in introducing our next speaker, Adam Chauvin, Senior Product Manager of Catapult Sports.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Chauvin. I'm a Senior Product Manager at Catapult, and I am thrilled to be here today to demonstrate the next frontier of data analytics in sport. So to understand where data analysis is going, let's start off with where it started. And in particular, let's look at the evolution of analysis in professional soccer as an example. Data analysis, as we think of it today, was made possible through computer software, and in particular, the video editor. See, with a video editor, teams can now log or tag all of the events that happen during a game, such as all the shots or the passes or the corner kicks, as well as all the metadata surrounding those events, like who took the shot, whether it was on or off target. And critically, the video editor allows you to sync up the data with those events. So now, you not only have a record of all the things that are happening in your games, but you have good and bad video examples that the coach and the team can reference. And to go further, the editor allows you to produce stats, like how many shots the team took in aggregate, each player's passing accuracy, how long each team was in possession of the ball. And again, the editor allows you to pull good and bad video examples of every one of those. So this basic capability to combine video and data opens up so many new ways for teams to analyze themselves as well as their opponents. Now, separate from video editors, a complementary data set emerged, and that was called positional data. Positional data allows you to see where all of your players are on the field at all times. It shows you the team's shape, each individual's movement, how far players are from one another, the amount of space the team occupies. And critically, tools like heat maps emerged, and they become the standard way to visualize and to communicate how teams are going to attack and defend. And so in that way, positional data became this integral part of a team's workflow. And now, teams had two incredibly powerful data sets available to them: event data and video on one hand, positional data on the other. But the problem is that these data sets were produced by different providers and analyzed in different software. And that process isn't just inefficient, it's ineffective. Not having all the data in one place means you miss out on key insights that could be the difference between winning and losing a game. So in 2015, SBG Sports released Match Tracker, a first-of-its-kind data analysis platform that could integrate all of the types of data that teams relied on. And for the first time, you could see all of this information in one place, and you could use the software to derive unique insights that were just never possible before. For instance, you could mathematically determine which players represented the best passing options at all time. You could empirically state how and why teams were able to receive passes between the opponent's defensive lines. And you could identify when teams were pressing forward versus sitting back. And critically, Match Tracker synced up all these instances, not just with the video, but with the positional data as well. And because of that, Match Tracker really became the best product on the market for the data and video analysis that teams rely on every day. But even with those advancements, there is yet another data set out there that teams care about, and that is athletes' physical data. Physical data encompasses things like your speed, your heart rate, whether you're involved in some sort of impact or collision, the amount of physical load that you're accumulating. And physical data is produced by a small piece of hardware called a wearable device. And these wearable devices are worn by players during practices and games to manage all of their physical metrics throughout the activity. And teams will analyze this data every day to monitor an athlete's risk of injury, to aid in return to play when players do get hurt, and to generally monitor the amount of load that players are accumulating throughout a season. But the problem with athletes' physical data is the same one we ran into before. It's produced by different providers in different formats. It's analyzed in different software by different people. And that leads us back to the same missed insights that we talked about previously. So last year, Catapult Sports, which is a global leader in wearable technology, came together with SBG, which pioneered Match Tracker. And since then, we've been working on the different ways to integrate Catapult's physical data within Match Tracker so that teams finally have a holistic and comprehensive understanding of all the data that they care about. And I'm excited to be here today to demonstrate that innovation and all the ways it's going to help your team. So first, let's start with the most obvious benefit. By integrating your physical data into Match Tracker, teams can now contextualize or understand the physical data that they're tracking today. Let me give you a specific example. Today, when teams wear these wearable devices, they might produce a report at the end of a game that says, player A had 15 sprints, or player B ran 6 miles. And while that high-level information is good for some purposes, the coach doesn't just want to know that a player had 15 sprints. He wants to know why. What was that player doing during those 15 sprints, and how did it impact our chance of winning? Was that player sprinting because he's making aggressive runs on goal to create scoring chances, or is that guy always committing interceptions and has to sprint back on defense to prevent goals? Similarly, is running 6 miles in a game good or bad? It's certainly a lot, but without knowing the context of why that athlete is running, we can't evaluate or coach off of that information. But now, because we've integrated that physical data into Match Tracker, we can contextualize those numbers into clearer insights. For instance, let's take that example, player A had 15 sprints in a game. The first way that we can deliver some clearer insights is to sync all those sprints up with video and let the coach just watch anyone that he wants. Heck, the video is going to show empirically exactly why a player was sprinting and how that impacted the game. So on the screen, I've actually got a list of all the sprints that an actual MLS team made in a recent game, and I can immediately see who made the run, how far they went, and what their top speed was. But more importantly, I can click on every one of those sprints and see the video. In this case, we're going to see a player making a strong offensive run that's going to lead to a goal, which is a perfect example of how and when I want my team sprinting. And this clip is a great example of what a good sprint looks like, so the coach might want to share it around to make a point. Fortunately, Match Tracker allows you to pull that clip, add some graphics to it, and share it over the cloud with that individual or with the entire team. And that basic workflow, see a piece of physical data, pull the video for it, share it with your team, that has just never been practical before. Now Match Tracker doesn't just make it practical, it makes it easy. And you can do it for every physical metric that your team tracks. For example, Catapult wearables don't just pick up on sprints. They track all those impacts and collisions that happen during a game as well. So here, I've just graphed out all the physical impacts that happen in that same MLS match. I'll start by bucketing them in 5-minute increments, and we can immediately see how the physicality of this game ebbs and flows over time. Fine start, but we can do a lot better. For instance, the wearable device doesn't just detect that an impact occurred, it measures the force of each impact. And here, I'll sort on that variable, and I'll just click on the video to see each one. That ability to see the video behind every shred of physical data has just never been practical before, and it allows the team to understand and plan for the types of scenarios that generate wear and tear on athletes. So watching the video is one way that we can deliver context to your physical data, but Match Tracker can go so much deeper. For instance, Match Tracker understands what we call the game state. This is things like who's in possession, whether they're attacking or just controlling the ball, what the score is, and we can break down players' physical data according to those game state variables as well to get an immediate and visual understanding of how teams are spending their energy. So if we go back to that list of sprints, you can see that with a couple of clicks, I'll break all of these down by offense and defense. Offense in green, defense in red. And I can immediately tell where my players are expending their energy without even having to watch the video. Alternatively, I can break those sprints down by other variables, like what phase of play they happened in, how those sequences ended, or how fast the sprints themselves were. The net is that no matter which of these tools a coach wants to use, he's no longer limited to knowing that player A had 15 sprints, because now Match Tracker tells him why the player was sprinting and how that effect contributed to the game. Here's one more example of how you can contextualize your physical data, this time from the world of rugby. As any coach or analyst will tell you, scrums are a vital part of a rugby game. There can be dozens of these in every match, and each one will take their own physical toll on athletes. Through the use of machine learning, Catapult wearables can actually detect these scrums automatically, and we generate really intricate data on every one of them. And now, we've integrated that physical scrum data into MatchTracker as well. You can see, for instance, which players were involved in which scrum. You can see how long it took them to get back to their feet, and the scrum's effect on each player's heart rate and player load. Then we can provide that data not just for scrums, but for kicks and collisions as well. That sort of information has clear implications, not just for load management, but for game strategy as a whole. But it has simply never been available to a rugby staff in this comprehensive of a way. Now, not only is that data available, but we've automated virtually the entire process to get it. That is the type of competitive advantage that MatchTracker can offer. So if the first benefit of this innovation is the ability to take the physical data that you're producing today and contextualize it in MatchTracker, the second benefit is being able to analyze your athletes' physical outputs in-game and to use that data to design more effective training and practice. Let's face it, at almost any level of sport, one of the critical objectives of practice is to prepare your athletes for game speed. Coaches need their players operating and practicing at those game physicality, not only to maximize their chances of winning, but also to prevent fatigue and injury. So how do you prepare for game speed? Well, first, you need to measure exactly what game speed looks like in different scenarios and in different styles of play. Catapult wearable devices monitor athletes in-game for every second they're playing. And by integrating that physical data into MatchTracker, we're now able to quantify all of the tactical elements of a game. For instance, we can calculate the exact physical toll from any possession, from any play, or any style of offense or defense. Let me give you a concrete example. In soccer, many teams will employ a high-pressing style of defense. Pressing is a very physically demanding style of play in which you'll ask your players to close down their opponents as quickly as possible, reduce their time and space, force them to make a mistake so that hopefully your team can recover the ball. Pressing like this necessitates players who can operate at high intensities for extended periods of time. Well, what do we know? What do we mean by high intensities at extended periods of time? Well, we have to measure it, and MatchTracker does just that. So here on the screen, I've actually found a few examples from that recent MLS match. And there's one in particular in the 18th minute that I'll draw your attention to. Now you can see in the video that the player is going to work hard to win the ball back high up the field. And if we watch till the end, our team does in fact regain possession. So by all accounts, a successful press. But in addition to the coach just watching this video and determining sort of by gut feel, yeah, this player was working hard enough, now we can use a new feature called the physical view to immediately see that player's physical data from this exact period of time. In this case, I'm trying to quantify what high intensity means. So I might look at metrics like work rate or player load or heart rate to quantify what level of physical play this player exhibited to play successfully in my system. Now, seeing the data for one single press is cool, but if I'm going to make a determination on this, I need a lot more data. And MatchTracker supports that use case as well. In fact, I can use this physical view to quantify every press from this half, or this game, or this entire season if I wanted to. And once I've quantified every press for an entire season, I have a clear profile of the physical attributes that are required to succeed in my system. With those benchmarks, you can design training drills and workout routines to prepare your athletes for the physicality of play that you expect. And since your athletes are wearing the same wearable devices in training as they are in games, you can empirically and easily compare these data sets and determine who is practicing at game speed and who is not. That is the type of holistic understanding that has simply never been possible in the world of sports. And MatchTracker now delivers it seamlessly. Here's a different example. In football, a lot of teams will run a high tempo or a hurry-up offense. And that high tempo style of play requires players to make a lot of accelerations, decelerations, and keep a high level of endurance. And here again, we can use MatchTracker to measure every play or every drive in a football game. We can quantify players' speeds, their accelerations, their decelerations, the load they're accumulating for whatever cut of time you need. And these measurements become the standard of play. Because once you're able to measure the exact physical requirements of your playing style, you can answer objectively which athletes can meet them. You can design better training sessions around them. You can determine who is over or under contributing to the team, and you can better prevent injuries. That is the type of competitive advantage that Match Tracker now delivers. Here's one final example of how to quantify the physicality of gameplay. Because we can measure any period of time, we can also measure every moment of time, like every shot, every pass, every corner. And so we can start to answer important questions like, does a player's heart rate or their volume of work impact their performance? We've all heard that term, she's got ice in her veins. And what the heck does that mean? Well, now in Match Tracker, it actually becomes pretty easy to quantify it. We could, for instance, measure every player's heart rate for every chance created late in a one-score game. And then we could look at those outcomes and see whether heart rate has any correlation on how those things impacted. Or here's another example. Down in the bar graph, I've plotted every player's passing accuracy throughout this entire game. And I can identify those passes which occurred when players had a high heart rate. Let's call it 150 beats per minute or more. And then we can see right away that some players do in fact have better and worse passing accuracies when their heart rate goes up. And you can do that for individual players or for the team as a whole. And fascinatingly, when we look at this team's data for this game, their passing accuracy drops by 4% when their heart rates rise. For a team looking for every competitive advantage possible, that is an insight that's never been available before. So thus far, we've talked about two distinct benefits to this integration. The ability to contextualize or to understand all the physical data that you prepare today, and the ability to measure game speed and design better training and practice off of it. A third benefit, then, is the ability and simply the sheer amount of time that it's going to save coaches and athletes. At Catapult, we are keenly aware of just how much work is required to do proper analysis, and it is our job to save you time at every moment possible. That means saving you time in locating and uploading the data, saving you time in syncing the data, saving you time in getting to actual insights and not just numbers on a screen. Several months ago, I spoke with an analyst at an NCAA D1 football team, and he told me about how he tries to integrate video with his wearable data and just how excruciatingly painful his process is today. If he sees an outlier in his team's physical numbers, a sudden drop in intensity or a spike in heart rate, he might go look for the video to see what caused it. To do so, he literally has to write down the date and time that that spike occurred. He's got to walk down the hall to the video coordinator's office, knock on the door, hope he's there, ask him for a favor, pull up the video, and then scrub through the thing until he finds about the time when that spike occurred. And he does all of that to contextualize one piece of physical data. With Match Tracker, we can now eliminate all of that manual work so that the next time that you have an outlier in your data, or the next time you want to understand the context between your team's physical output, you can see it on the screen, double-click on it, watch the video, understand the data, and get back to coaching and winning games. That is the type of competitive advantage that Match Tracker delivers. So with that, I thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'll take any questions you have now.
Thank you very much. One question, as someone who's worked live in sports and wants to know insights during the game, I'm curious what kind of lag effects you've got during matches that you can provide insights to some of these things right away, because I'm sure coaches would love to know if they're in one of those situations right now where action should really be taken.
Yeah, great question. So we can report all of this data live. All of the video and Match Tracker can be reported live as well. The syncing up of the wearable data and the video right now is done post-match, but putting it together in a live scenario is on our roadmap.
I actually have the opposite question. I think you can make a little bit of data with something like this. I mean, do you guys support the aggregation of, something like that heart rate data across games where you can get a little bit, more statistical significance out of the findings that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So Match Tracker can work across games as well. And for instance, in the video, I actually pulled in several games and looked at presses across multiple instances. And we said, give me the average heart rate for every player who is involved in any press in any of these games. So Match Tracker can do that longitudinal analysis as well.
Is this something that you see being available in all sports? For instance, I work with a hockey team, and I know we don't have video integration yet. Do you know when that would be coming, or what are the plans for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this sort of wearable data integration we'll bring to all the sports that we can. We don't have it for hockey yet, but very aware of how important it is, so more to come.
Yeah, so far you've been tracking them, the athletes as like single points. Is there any addition of body motion and pose estimation so we can see the biomechanics of what's going on at each spot?
Yeah, it's one of the things that we think about a lot. Nothing to report here today, but biomechanics seems like an obvious next step for us to look at.
Do you see a future where you're tracking more than just in-game data as well? For example, like maybe how sleep data affects a player the night before a game or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. All those other nutritional or biomechanical aspects, what they're eating, women's menstrual cycles, all of those things will go into determining how athletes perform, and we certainly want to bring all of that into the fold as well.
Hello. What about goalkeepers? You did not even mention them.
Yeah, so we can do all these information for goalkeepers as well. And in fact, Catapult's wearables produce some goalkeeper-specific metrics, dives, how much load those dives require, which way they're diving, any performance differences when they're going left, right, or center. So everything you see here works for keepers as well.
Any other questions?
Do you have any open source data sets that you plan to release to like the public, so to kind of encourage open source work?
Oh, good question. I'm not sure that we're going to release anything to the public right now, but maybe we'll talk after.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you.